Hello, everyone. I'll wait just a few seconds to let everyone get connected up. All right. My name is Vanessa. I'm with the Dallas Public Library, and we do this Grow With Us series in partnership with the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability. Just a few housekeeping things for today. You will be muted and your camera will be turned off. However, if you have any questions, you can put those in the chat and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. And let me go ahead and turn it over to Nedra with OEQS, and she's going to introduce our speaker today. So thank you so much, Nedra. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for being with us today. And we are very excited to continue our partnership with the Dallas Public Library to present this free program. My name is Nedra Richard Morgan, and I work for the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability. Our division is one of over 70 city departments and divisions within the city of Dallas. And our day-to-day focus is on environmental activities, processes, programs, and major plans such as the Comprehensive Environmental Climate Action Plan, also known as CCAP. Our programs range from A to Z, air quality to green living to zero waste. For example, under the topic of green living and air quality, the City of Dallas is working to implement the first urban forest master plan, and you will be hearing more about it in the months ahead. For this time of the year and with the extreme cold temperatures we have experienced, plants are going through a dormant period. As temperatures will increase, soil will warm and plant roots will grow, which will increase plant growth. Resting and dormancy before spring is vital for these elements of your landscape, giving them a better chance to use their renewed energy to thrive later in the year. So if they look drab and sad right now, that's actually the right look. Let them have the break they need. I want to remind you to make sure your irrigation system is switched completely off. And if you do want to irrigate your lawn because there has been little rain in most of the Metroplex, please wait until the temperature is above freezing, which usually means running your system in the early evening rather than late at night or the early hours of the morning. The reason for this is that the temperature can drop below freezing after midnight. So just as a friendly reminder, the Dallas watering schedule is twice per week. For more details about the schedule and other water saving tips, visit savedallaswater.com or waterisawesome.com. I also want to mention leaves. Please either mulch them with your mower, rake them, or put them into your compost bin or dispose of them with your trash, but don't let them stay on the ground and blow or get swept into the storm drains. Now I would like to turn our focus to today's speaker and program, Healthy Roots Make Healthy Plants with Lori Nesbitt. Lori Nesbitt is a returning guest. We are so honored and pleased to have Lori Nesbitt with us today. She was our keynote speaker for the 2021 WaterWise Landscape Tour that is produced by our Water Conservation Division. She's an experienced landscape architect and as passionate about saving water as she is about getting the best dirt out of life. Lori has been a licensed and active landscape architect for 29 years. She is highly skilled in the area of spacing, planning, and designing, and uses native and drought-tolerant plants while also incorporating many other features into her design that save stormwater and require less potable water without sacrificing the beauty of the outdoor spaces she creates for her clients. Lori has a Master's of Landscape Architect from Texas A&M University, where she graduated as an Honor Society member. And she has a Bachelor of Science in Biology from Stephen F. Austin University. Some of her past work experiences includes freelance residential design in the Netherlands and in Austin, Texas. She has also specialized as an irrigation and water conservation specialist for the city of Austin, working with the residential homeowners to educate and adjust their home irrigation systems to work more efficiently. Lori has volunteered her time at the Dallas Arboretum as a docent and for garden maintenance. You will learn her secret formula to making the best dirt in Dallas. Please help me welcome Lori Nesbitt to the virtual podium.
Thank you, Nedra. Hi, thanks everybody for having me. I design residential garden spaces for a living. Afterwards, I go away and the homeowner takes care of it. Most people want low maintenance landscapes, but as we know, plants do need care. Whether you do it yourself or hire a landscape company, I have some suggestions that may ultimately reduce your maintenance and your water bill and keep your plants looking good. Slide. This is a view of a space I was asked to improve. Slide. And here it is 3 years after it was installed. The homeowner has done a great job of following the soil maintenance and watering suggestions I will be going over today. So more specifically, we will be talking about how to feed and water your roots to get more out of your entire landscape. Slide. The photos throughout this section will show you landscapes where the additives listed here on this slide have been applied by following a calendar as to when to apply them. I'll be going over each ingredient and each calendar. The calendar will show applications 5 times during the growing season, broken down into twice in the spring, once in the summer, and twice in the fall. The ingredients listed on this slide are gold for roots, all roots, including grass. So your grass should definitely be included when treating your entire landscape. It's kind of a long list, so don't feel like you have to be a perfectionist by applying everything each season. The point is to improve your soil. By following the program accurately initially, though, in the long run, it will cost you less time and money, because the healthier your soil gets, then the healthier your roots get. And you don't have to water as often, and you won't have disease problems. You'll be able to reduce the time in caring for your landscape. On this slide, I've highlighted the primary benefits of each ingredient, so you know why the ingredients are recommended. I feel like it's a lot easier to stay on the program if I know why I'm doing it. The calendars on the following slides will mention all but the bottom 2 ingredients. Expanded shale and earthworm castings aren't on the calendar because you can really add them anytime. I mainly add expanded shale and earthworm castings during the bed prep phase, but it's really great even if you are planting just one plant. I will also occasionally throw some out into the existing grass and beds just whenever I feel like it. Again, the great thing about organic is that you don't have to be a perfectionist. Slide. So the calendar starts with spring. It's explained on this slide, but corn gluten meal is something I want to point out specifically here. It is the broadleaf weed preventative, applied 2 weeks before any of the other additives, because it's important that you apply it to catch the weed seeds before they germinate. The fertilizer and additives come afterward to encourage the growth you want. So definitely apply it to your grass. And I say here to apply it to your beds at your discretion, because corn gluten meal doesn't know the difference between a reseeding perennial you want and one that you consider a weed. Now, unfortunately, this is pretty stinky stuff, and the yellow color kind of sticks out like a sore thumb, but even so, it is definitely worth it. And both of those things do fade, the stinky part and the color. Your grassy weeds do need to be pulled by hand, however, but keep in mind that the healthier your soil is, the thicker your grass and your desired plants will grow, so weeds will not be as big of a problem. Slide. Before I learned about corn gluten meal, it would take forever to dig weeds out of these rocks, the river rocks, the Mexican pebbles that are gray. I would venture to guess time spent has been reduced by about 95% using corn gluten meal. Slide. So 2 weeks after the weed preventative, you add the other additives, including organic fertilizer. On this list, I've included all the individual ingredients you can get, but I do cheat and I buy ready-made organic fertilizer. I do make sure that it's a good one though, like maybe Texas Tea, which I've used, or I've heard Ladybug is also a good brand. I also get a generic nursery brand, but just make sure that it's organic and from a good nursery. Ready-made may not have all, but it will have several of these ingredients listed. If you have a specific need though, you can apply the specific ingredient. Slide. On the spring calendar, mulch is listed to apply in late February. But if you're a purist, just let the leaves be your mulch. They have the best nutrients anyway, but many prefer a neat and tidy look, and bark mulch definitely does give a great finished look to your beds. If you adjust your application to when the leaves fall, there's no reason why you can't have the best of both worlds by leaving some of the leaves and adding bark mulch on top. In the spring, I'm thinking specifically about those live oak leaves, so sometimes they get really thick. You might want to compost some of those. My clients tell me I love mulch, but look at all the things that it does on this slide. Of course I love it. Be sure and get organic or Texas native and either hardwood or cedar bark mulch. Those are the best for around Dallas. Slide. Oh, wait, don't change the slide real quick. One thing it does drive me crazy is when I see mulch up against the stems or the trunks or the crowns of the plants. That's one possible way to make a plant rot. Just keep mulch about 4 inches away from wherever the plant is coming out of the ground. I just wanted to point that out. Okay, now slide. Liquid seaweed and manure are the final 2 ingredients on the spring calendar. Here is a recipe for how to make the foliar spray, but there are ready-made brands out there too. Again, think organic when you buy. This is a great root stimulator and bud stimulator. And manure, the last ingredient, well, you can just see that it has everything. Slide. This is a photo of a retaining wall. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, now you can go back to the other one. This is what to do in late June. Besides the foliar spray, which is also applied in June, one of the things that is extremely beneficial to add to your soil is organic compost. Just a really thin layer, not only to your beds, but out to your lawn, will add nutrients, help to retain moisture, and to break up your clay. Dried molasses feeds the good bugs, and we definitely want good bugs in the soil. Lava sand improves aeration. Texas green sand improves moisture retention. You'll probably find some of these ingredients in ready-made fertilizers too. And while we add fertilizer only in the spring and the fall, it's perfectly fine if these ingredients are included and implied when the fertilizer is applied. Slide. In the fall, there's another 2 applications of the corn gluten meal we talked about, followed 2 weeks later with the organic fertilizer. In September, you will want to give your soil a boost with all these yummy ingredients we've already talked about and are listed here. And of course, in early November, add the finishing touches with mulch, or you can wait a bit for the mulch if you want to put a layer on top of your fallen leaves. Slide. Now that we've done everything we can do to give your roots the best food available, let's talk about how to give them the best drink. One of my first jobs was teaching homeowners how to use their irrigation systems more effectively for their grass. This was for the city of Austin, and people there were running their systems like 3 or more times a week and just basically splashing water on top of their grass by running each of their zones, maybe 5, maybe 15 minutes, 5, 10, 15 minutes. They were basically just developing a very shallow root system, and they couldn't figure out why their grass looked so bad. Watering can be tricky. Some people have a real feel for it, others don't. That's why I say it's not an exact science. But I'm going to give you some guidelines and perhaps a completely different way of thinking how you water. In the long run, I know it will reduce how much you water. Slide. In this photo, it is a retaining wall that has failed. And the reason why I put it in here is because look at the top and you see the grass, right? Now look below and follow the vertical earth wall. Those are grass roots. I just think it's a great visual to show you just how deep grass roots can grow. And that's what I'm going to talk about now, grass, and how do we get those deep grass roots? Slide. So I don't know this for a fact, but based on my experience with the city of Austin, I'm guessing our watering restrictions here in Dallas of 2 days per week came into play because some people were just watering every day if they could, which besides it being wasteful and expensive, it is definitely not the way to grow healthy, deep roots. With the 2 day per week restriction, most homeowners I speak with think they need to use both of these days or their plants are going to die. This restriction is not meant as a guideline of how much you need to water. You can actually water a lot fewer days if on the days you do water, you do it in a way that will promote deep root growth. This can be accomplished by, number 1, giving your soil the nutrients we've gone over, and number 2, by watering deeply only as needed, not on a set time schedule. So many use their irrigation systems as a set it and forget it tool. That's when it's set twice per week to irrigate on the assigned days, no matter what. Even if you see it going off in the middle of a rain, you see it going off in the middle of a rainstorm, in the middle of the day, or with water running down the street. The irrigation system is a great way of making sure all parts of your landscape gets water, but it's not there to think for you. Slide. So this is the second main thing I wanted to share with you today. How to water so the roots grow deeper, so you don't have to water as often. The whole point is to get the water to penetrate deep into the ground. This year, I irrigated a large property a total of 5 times from spring to fall. And this is how I did it. Look at this photo. Do you see the footprints in the grass? The grass is lying flat from walking across it because it's dehydrated. It's not good to dehydrate plants very often, but for this to work, you kind of have to dehydrate it a little bit initially to get the roots to grow. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but hear me out. First, turn off your irrigation system. The next time you think you need to water, walk across your grass. You don't necessarily need to see a full footprint, but at least you want to see the grass not bouncing back as vigorously when you walk on it. Or another way to tell is you can look at the blades in the middle of the afternoon, like in the middle of the summer, and see if they are curling a little. If you can also tell when your grass has lost its luster and is dulled out a bit. These are all ways your grass is telling you that it's time to water on your next watering day. Slide. Now it's time to implement what I call the 3 rounds and wait system. This slide shows you what you don't want to see. I will speak as if we all have irrigation systems, but I personally don't have one. So you can follow the same method with manual sprinklers too. What this means is on your next watering day, after your grass has told you it needs water, water a minimum of 3 rounds of your irrigation zones, even better if it's 4 or 5 rounds. Then wait to irrigate again only when the grass doesn't bounce back. So what I mean is it may not be on your very next assigned watering day. Specifically, the first round is to just moisten the soil, maybe 5 minutes. Let it soak in. This will prep the soil to take in more water the second round. The next round will be for a little longer, maybe 10 minutes. If you see runoff, such as you see in these photos, reduce the time for that round. You want the water to soak in. How many times have you gone down the street and seen water wasted away, just like these pictures? Runoff means the water isn't penetrating. Follow up with 2 more rounds, increasing the time for each. As long as your heads aren't irrigating the concrete, there is no runoff. The water is penetrating a bit deeper each time. Once you've completed the 3 or 4 or even more rounds, that's considered 1 day's irrigation. Don't irrigate again until you see the grass not bouncing back when you walk across it. The number of days between your irrigation days will grow as the roots grow deeper. Remember I said that I irrigated a property 5 times from spring until today, or basically until the fall. This is what happened. Beginning in the spring of 2020, I did everything I just told you with improving the soil and this watering system on a lawn that had for years been on traditional weed and feed fertilizer and a twice-a-week irrigation schedule. That year in 2020, I irrigated twice in the spring, 6 times in the summer, and once in the fall for a total of 9 times. In 2021, last year, same yard, same method, I watered once in the spring, twice during the summer, and twice in the fall for a total of 5 times. I watered when it was needed around the rain days we had. We had a decent amount of scattered rain days, but because I irrigated deeply, allowing the water to penetrate, I was able to work with Mother Nature instead of in spite of her. I know for a fact I irrigated less than what occurred in the rest of the neighborhood. At the beginning of 2020, the yard was full of weeds. So as a bonus, the weeds in 2021 are all but gone. And the grass looks just as green as any other lawn being watered twice a week. You can start making a difference pretty quickly with the soil additives and paying attention to how and when you water. Slide. So if you have grass, and you want grass, great. Play football on it, roll around in it, run barefoot through it, but don't water it so often. And if you don't need grass, make a bigger planting bed. Hardy established shrubs can be watered the same way, and they can be watered even less than grass. Even at the very least, if you reduce your irrigation to twice a month, that's a significant drop from twice a week. Slide. So we have been talking about watering grass primarily, but the same goes for all of your landscape. As far as your planting beds go, there is an exception to this watering system, and that is the first year after a plant is planted. Slide. This garden was put in just last April, and while eventually it will be able to follow the 3 rounds and wait system, for now and up to a year, a whole new garden like this, or just one plant, needs to be watered regularly for the first 2 weeks and then checked regularly for the first year. This homeowner had it easy. If you remember, it rained a lot in May, so she didn't have to do anything. But if it doesn't rain, for those first 2 weeks, pretend each plant is still in its nursery container and water it as if you were making sure the container is thoroughly moistened. Don't just splash water on top of the plant and don't drown it like a flood. Depending on the time of year, type of soil, and if they are in the sun or the shade, it could mean you are doing this twice a week or daily. Large trees and large shrubs will need hand watering sometimes for up to a year after installation. Really, if you get those roots established during that first year, remember the first slide I showed you? Slide. For everything besides most annuals, you might water once or twice a month at the most. Annuals in generally, and specifically the caladiums in this photo, do need more. But why water your entire landscape if only your annuals need the water? Slide. I have the hardest time getting my clients to do this. Not sure if you need to water your beds, simply sticking your finger in the dirt will tell you so much information. Really, feel the soil. Is it mucky wet? Is it dry as a bone? Or is it cool and moist? I know there are meters available, but for me, the finger test is better. I also think about how humid or dry it's been, how much rain we've had, if the plant is in the sun or the shade, and what the leaves look like. But when in doubt, feel that soil. Slide. Every plant is different, but you can help them achieve their ideal root depth. Slide. By giving them all the good food we went over, everything on this list. Slide. By watering slowly and completely thoroughly, then backing off to let the soil dry out. Slide. By giving new plants a head start and helping them transition from the bubble they were in the nursery to your house. Slide. By thinking about what the weather is like, where the plant is planted, and what their special needs might be. Slide. By looking at the leaves. Slide. But sometimes you really just have to get down and dirty, bite the bullet, and stick your finger in the soil to see if it's wet or dry. Slide. Low maintenance is not no maintenance, but doing these things will ultimately simplify your maintenance and reduce how much you water and how much water you use on your landscape. Healthy roots make healthy and beautiful landscapes. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Laura. That's some great information. I know, so you have the nutrients you're adding in the spring and the fall are the two main times people need to worry about their soil more than any other time. Is that what I'm getting from? That's what I got from it. Like, we really need to, focus on the spring and the fall and improving our soil health so our plants grow well. But if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. We had one comment that those are some amazing gardens. Those are beautiful. I love the mixture of plants that you've done there. Those are really awesome.
Thank you.
I know a question that people ask me a lot of times, because when people find out you garden, you get questions, right?
Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I get a lot of questions about favorite perennials to put into landscaping. Do you have any favorite perennials that you find need less water that do really well in the area?
Oh, there's a ton of them. I mean, pretty much every salvia out there is great. Although black and blue salvia, I found that they need a little bit more water than some of the other ones. I love Texas aster. I love columbine. Texas aster for the sun. I like columbine for the shade, or morning sun. And oh gosh, there's a jillion of it. If you want something that will spread, something that does really well is obedient plant. And there's some good natives. There's lyre leaf sage and cedar sage. They're good native plants for the shade. Oh gosh, there's just so many.
And I see in this final slide the picture of the Japanese maple there. Those are beautiful plants. I know people sometimes struggle with those. Do you have any tips for people keeping those alive?
Well, it's good if particularly the soil, the roots, it has pretty shallow roots, and so if you keep the roots shaded or mulched, you don't want to do heavy mulch or whatever on them, but you want to keep them kind of in the shade. And of course, maples do great in morning sun.
They don't like the full sun, right? They're an understory plant, so they don't want the full blast of.
No, morning sun would be the most. And, quite a few of them do well and quite a bit of shade, but you need a little bit of dappled light or a little bit of that morning sun to get the full value of how pretty the colors, because the sun really makes the colors sparkle.
And is there, I know there's a bunch of different ingredients. I don't know, Jordan, if you could put that slide back up that towards the beginning that had all the different ingredients and the explanation for them. I think it was like the third or fourth slide maybe. But if people can only, have the resources to only get one of those, which do you think is the most important one for the healthy soil? And they could only go with one thing, what would you say the most important one would be?
A good organic compost probably is kind of the overall one, but really all those other ones are just pretty amazing.
Yes,
they really do add something.
I'm glad you mentioned the expanded shell in there about improving the texture of clay soil, because I know that's an issue people have with growing some plants here in the Dallas area, especially if they're trying to do in-ground vegetable gardening, is that heavy soil that we have here, that clay is.
Yes. and throw it, like I said earlier, throwing that out whenever, and you just can put it on top because it'll work its way down in there. But if you're doing a whole bed or whatever, including that in your bed prep is just excellent.
Do you recommend, I know some people aerate their yard before they put down some of the supplements. Is that something you would recommend? Or you said it will work its way down, but would aeration improve that, or do you find that doesn't make a difference if you aerate first or not?
My personal experience, I haven't found that needed, but I guess it depends really on how compacted your soil is. Everybody's different.
This is true. Let's see, we have another comment here. Oh gosh, they said they lost more plants in the little freeze than they did during February 2020. Do you have any recommendations for rebuilding? Should they just assume some of the plants will come back? And do you have any recommendations on how to help those plants bounce back a little bit better after the freeze?
Probably just getting started on this spring calendar would help it. Anytime you add these ingredients is going to help. And it's interesting too, so many people, I'm not saying that plants didn't die, because they definitely did, but for instance, I had 2 pittosporums in my yard and I just left them alone. And I think in about July, I started seeing growth at the root zone. And so they've come back, both of them. But, obviously there's lots of them that did die, but I think a lot of people just kind of jumped the gun a little bit and took plants out before they needed to.
Yes, they're sometimes more resilient than we give them credit for sometimes, especially if they have the good roots.
And the do really too is when it's going to freeze, be sure and water. That's the time to irrigate, because you want the water in your soil around those roots, because if they are, the roots will stay at 32, which is the temperature water freezes at. And you don't want the roots to get any lower than that 32. So irrigating before freeze helps tremendously.
That's a really good tip. Yeah. Yeah. Also, something I know people cover their plants, but a tip I was reading is like, don't make your trees and things into what they call lollipops. So don't cover just the top, because you're not getting that heat from the soil that you mentioned, that those plants need to help keep them warm. So make sure you're covering the whole plant and not just the top of the plant.
Yeah, or just pick plants that aren't that tender. there's a few, I have to say, there's a few that I picked that I really like. Like you mentioned, you said, what are some of your favorite perennials? There's one that I really love, and that's leopard plant. And giant leopard plant is a fabulous plant, but it can really get nipped by the cold and freeze. And so I almost always add that to any landscapes that I design, but I always, ask the people first, are you okay? If there's one, it's okay if it dies down to the ground because it will come back from the crown. But if you want it to stay looking good and a little bit bigger for longer, then you can cover, I recommend covering that. But otherwise, pick things that it's okay if they get cold.
So do you have any recommendations about like when your your perennials are looking kind of dead in the winter, when to trim those back? I know some of them, like I love Bishop's cap or Turk's cap, and you usually cut that down, when it's dormant, like to about 6 inches. Do you have any general recommendations for, when it's good to trim back your perennials before the spring growth?
Well, everybody has their own tolerance level for how ugly things are. But for instance, you brought up Turk's cap. There's actually insects that like to crawl inside the middle of Turk's cap, and that's their home during the wintertime. And it's a healthy, the good bugs, the beneficial bugs, and you want to keep them around. And so if you can tolerate, kind of a straggly look, then I recommend not really cutting anything back until late February. Late February is the absolutely best time to cut things back and get things ready for the spring and to do all the soil additives and that we went over on the spring calendar. But some people don't have that tolerance, and so each plant is kind of different. Like if you cut back autumn sage, for example, in the fall, it's gonna not like that. But something like Turk's cap, it's perfectly fine in the fall, after the first freeze, to go ahead and cut that back to 6 inches.
Okay. Yeah, I know. Also, like, I guess when people are thinking about planting, spring is coming up soon. Is now a good time to plant perennials, or should they wait maybe till February, like later in February? Do you have a general guideline when the good time to put in, like, maybe you want to put in new perennial landscape, when would be the best time of the year to do that?
Well, it's interesting. The spring blooming perennials are best to plant in the fall. The fall blooming perennials are best to plant in the spring. The problem is the nurseries, and they only have these silly perennials when they look good. So when they have them during the year, during the season that they look good, not necessarily during the time you're supposed to plant them. But in Dallas, really, you can plant any time of the year. I would say August would be the absolutely worst time to plant anything, or late July and August is the worst time to plant anything. But really, you can plant, if you can find them in the nursery, you can probably plant them. And if you're going to have a freeze, then you don't want to, you probably do want to protect a new plant because those roots are still tiny and not really developed in the soil. So yeah.
So when you're planting a perennial, do you recommend putting any of these supplements like inside the hole when you're planting it, or just mixing it into the soil in general as you're planting? I see people where they dump all this stuff in the hole, and I'm wondering if that's too much for the plant, or
yeah, I think it's best if you're gonna. What we do when I have an installation crew, and what we do is we have the area that we're going to have as a planting area, and we put the compost over the whole thing, and we throw out the additives over the whole thing, and then the guys start digging the holes with everything that's been put on top. So then it eventually kind of mixes up with what you're going to end up with. Especially trees and large shrubs, it's best to put it in native soil, because that's what it's going to be living in. You don't want to develop a bathtub or whatever of great soil, and then it's going to hit the clay side and go, oh my God, what's that? But so you want it to get used to what kind of environment it's going to live in. And so just having the additives in there to where it starts nourishing the soil when you plant it.
Very cool. Well, are there any other questions? For Laurie, feel free to put them in the chat. It's nice to have a nice, good soil expert and watering expert with us. So take advantage of that if you have any questions about irrigation or soil building. Let's see. Oh, that's a good question, Nedra. So what are some of the things we need to start thinking about when we're designing a landscape? Like what's a good starting point if you're looking at a landscape and deciding what to do?
Well, the first thing that I tell any of my clients, I want them to think about how they're going to use their space. I mean, this is like a room of your house. And, you know, do you want to view it? You know, one of my clients said, we want to sit on our deck and we want to look at it. We don't want to go into it. We don't want to run around in it. We want to view it like a painting. And so when I went over there, I sat on her deck and took pictures of what they were gonna look at. And so my design was thinking about, you know, how it was going to look as a painting and their particular style. Everybody has a certain style that they like. That particular client liked, they used the word Zen. And so it was a Zen garden that I designed and to look like a garden, to look like a painting. Other people, they want to be able to go out and sit in it and have a fire pit. I'm putting a landscape in right now that's going to have a big, huge area because she said, we love to go out there when the family comes to go out there and we love to laugh and talk and we want to be able to be around a big, real fire, not a gas fire, and, just be comfortable out there. And so really think about the function of how you're going to use your landscape first.
And I think some people don't take into consideration what their, if they have a slope on their, yard and that kind of thing.
Those are all the nitty gritty technical part of putting it all together, of course. Yes, you need to get the grade right, make sure it drains correctly, look at the sun and the shade. I do a what I call a sun pattern study. And the best time to do that is actually in mid-July because that's the hottest part of Dallas at time. And I want to see the worst conditions for Dallas for a plant. And so I would need to make sure that I put a sun tolerant plant in a sunny place, not in a shady place. So if I look at it in the wintertime, the sun is different and it might be shady in the wintertime. But very sunny in the summertime. So I want to pick a sun tolerant plant for that spot. And so that's really important. And also size, don't go pick a plant that's going to grow to 6 feet if you're going to end up spending a bunch of time and money chopping it down to 3 feet.
Good point. And I've also seen where people, are excited to fill in their landscape. So they plant the plants too close together, right? Not thinking about what their full grown size will be.
Yeah, when I do a plan, I put the ultimate size on the plan so it looks really full, or depending on the tall, what kind of landscape somebody wanted. But I put the full size of the plant on the plan. But when I put them in, it looks pretty sparse to begin with. I mean, you saw in one of those pictures how flat and sparse it kind of looked, and that's because it was a brand new landscape.
So be sure you look at those when you're at the nursery. Be sure you look at what the maximum size of that plant is when you pick it out.
Yep.
I've been guilty of that before. Like, oh, this is so pretty, and then it gets to be 6 feet around.
Exactly. Yeah. It's good not just to look at the tags of the nursery. Google them. And I always put Dallas. If I Google a plant, I always put Dallas afterwards because what a plant does in Dallas is, or North Central Texas, one of those two, what a plant does in this area is not necessarily what it's going to do in Georgia, or anywhere else.
Yes. And I like what you mentioned earlier about how much work you want to put into it, because there's some things we can grow here in Dallas if you put a whole lot of work into it, but you have to think, is that worth putting all that work into it to get it to grow here, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I know I think most of the palm trees got wiped out after the freeze we had last year, but
yeah, but there's some tolerant palms. I've got dwarf sable palm out in my backyard, and it did better than a lot of things.
That's good to know that there are some that will survive here.
That's a little dwarf plant. But, it's kind of big for a dwarf plant, but it is a dwarf palm.
Yes, and I was tempted to try to grow an olive here because my sister grows olives down in Austin, but they have a very different, amount of cold time down there than we have up here.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right. So any other questions? A question that I always wonder about is what time of day is it best to do the foliar spray? Is it best to do it in the morning or?
Any kind of water on the plants is best in the morning.
Okay. So just like with watering, it's best to get that in. Okay.
Best in the morning, yeah. Well, that's one thing that the city of Dallas, they say don't water after 10 a.m. And that's just not only good because the water in the afternoon is going to evaporate into the air more than get on your plants, but it's also just the best for the plant.
Right, because watering at night can cause the water to sit there, right, and can cause some issues if you water at night.
Yeah, depending on the time of year, but yeah.
Okay. All right, so last call for questions in the chat. Anybody have any other questions while we have Laurie here? All right. Give people just a few minutes to type. And in this picture that we're looking at here on the screen, that's a salvia in the foreground, correct? Is that a salvia?
Yeah, that's actually cedar sage, which sage and salvia are the same thing, yeah.
Okay.
And that's underneath a live oak tree.
Oh, wow. So it's partial shade and it still grows that pretty.
Yeah, it gets a little bit of just a tad of morning sun there, but not very much. It's pretty shady.
I know we in a lot of neighborhoods in Dallas where we have the more mature trees, people are always looking for a good, shade flower.
Yeah, in that particular bed, there's prostrate yew, there's giant liriope, cedar sage, some Linton rose. Let's see what else is in there. Oh, I got a little bit of flirt nandina. It's kind of a mix of a lot of different things in there, but those all do really well in shady or dappled shade.
Beautiful. All right, so we got a comment about thank you, and you did a great job with the presentation. And yes, thank you, Laurie, so much for sharing your wisdom with us.
Oh,
I know I need to go to the nursery now and get me some soil improvement so I can start getting my soil ready. I cheat and I do raised beds for my vegetables, but for my I tend to neglect my other landscaping plants. So I need to be a little bit better about giving them supplements too.
Oh, I'm impressed with people that can grow vegetables. I can't do it. I tried growing some pole beans one year, and I looked out my kitchen window and I saw a squirrel on his back, and he was reaching up into the leaves of the beans and eating them like he was king of the world.
Yes, and a trick that I found that worked for me last year is I just let some volunteer sunflowers come up near my bird feeders, and the squirrels went after those instead of my vegetable plants. So they had an easy, colorful meal there that attracted them, so they left my other ones alone.
Oh, that's good. That's a good tip.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you use the trap plants for the insects. It was kind of like a squirrel trap plant.
That sounds like it'd be good for lots of people. Lots of people have too many squirrels in their yard, I think. But
yes, they are voracious too. Yeah, that's why I only grow cherry tomatoes now too, because if they steal some cherry tomatoes, I'm not as depressed as if they steal my giant, beefsteak tomato.
That's hilarious.
All right. Well, if there's no other questions, thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully I'll have some ideas to go out and improve your yard for the for the spring. And look at the spring calendar started in February, so it's a good time to start thinking about it right now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laurie. Did you have anything, Nedra?
No, I just want to thank Laurie for being a guest speaker on our program. We definitely love having her, and just want to thank the partnership with you guys, and just thank everybody for attending. And we look forward to seeing you all next Monday. And
as Laurie mentioned, keeping your soil healthy is a good way to prevent insects. But if you get insects, next week we'll have Jeff Raska from the Texas A&M Extension talking about integrated pest management and how we can work more organically to keep those pests out of our yard and out of our gardens.
Awesome. Well,
yes, thank you.
Well, Thank you so much. Thank you all for attending. We'll see you next week.